The elevator climbed to the 32nd floor, and Ethan Vale knew something was wrong. Facilities contractors didn't get summoned to executive suites, not unless someone wanted them gone. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man who'd learned to disappear, calloused hands, forgettable face, eyes that had seen too much. When Sienna Hart offered him a director position with a salary that could change everything, he said no before she finished speaking, because Ethan had learned the hard way. When powerful people wanted something from you, it wasn't a gift. It was a trap. And he'd already paid that price once. Stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the basement maintenance corridor buzzed like dying insects. Ethan Vale crouched beside an industrial air handler, grease on his knuckles, listening to the machine's labored breathing. 8 years of this work had taught him that buildings, like people, told you when something was broken. You just had to shut up and listen. His radio crackled. "Vale, you down there?" Ethan pressed the button without looking up. "Yeah." "Security needs you on 32, now." His hands stopped moving. The 32nd floor. Executive territory. In 3 years working facilities for Meridian Tower, he'd never been called above the 20th. They say what for? Static, then, just said to send you up. They were specific about the name. Ethan wiped his hands on his work pants and stood slowly, knees protesting. 32 years old, and his body already kept score of every mistake he'd made. The scar tissue on his left side pulled when he reached for his toolkit. He left it. Whatever was happening upstairs, a wrench wouldn't help. The service elevator took 90 seconds to climb 32 floors. Ethan counted each one, the way he counted Mila's breathing when she slept, the way he'd counted seconds between gunshots in a different life. Old habits died hard. Old habits kept you alive. The doors opened onto a different world. Marble floors caught the afternoon light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled like expensive coffee and the particular brand of ambition that came with corner offices. A woman in a tailored suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent looked up from her desk. "Mr. Vale?" "That's me." "Ms. Hart is expecting you." She gestured toward a set of double doors, mahogany or something trying to look like it. "Go right in." Ethan had learned to read rooms the way other people read books. This one screamed money and control. The office beyond those doors would be worse. He considered the elevator behind him, still open. Nobody would stop him if he just left. But they'd called him by name, specifically. That meant they already knew something, and running would only confirm it. He pushed through the doors. Sienna Hart stood with her back to him, silhouetted against the window, looking out over a city she probably thought she owned a piece of. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, though the way she held herself added years of authority. Dark hair pulled back severe, the kind of posture they taught at schools that had Latin mottos. "Mr. Vale, thank you for coming up." She didn't turn around. Her reflection in the glass watched him instead. "Close the door." He did. The click of the latch felt too loud. "Do you know who I am?" "You're the CEO." Everyone knew Sienna Hart. She'd taken over Meridian Properties 2 years ago when her father stepped down, and according to breakroom gossip, she'd doubled their portfolio in 18 months. The business sections loved her, the kind of success story that made other people feel inadequate. "And you're the man who fixed our HVAC crisis last winter when every other contractor said it would take 2 weeks. She finally turned to face him. Her eyes were the color of steel and just as sharp. 72 hours. You had the entire building operational in 72 hours during the coldest week of the year. Ethan said nothing. Confirmation seemed unnecessary. Before that, you identified a structural concern in the parking garage that our engineering team missed. Before that, you streamlined our maintenance schedules and cut our utility costs by 18%. She walked to her desk, each step deliberate. You've been here 3 years. You arrive early, leave late, and you've never once asked for a raise or promotion. I'm good at my job. You're overqualified for your job. She sat, gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. I'm fine standing. Something flickered in her expression. Not anger, calculation. She was used to people doing what she said. Suit yourself. I'll be direct. I'm creating a new position, Director of Operations and Strategic Planning. It's a senior role, executive track with full oversight of facilities, security, and resource management across all Meridian properties. The salary she named would have sounded like a joke if her face hadn't been completely serious. It was more than double what he made now. More than enough to move Mila out of their cramped apartment, private school, college fund, everything he couldn't give her on a contractor's wage. No, Ethan said. Sienna Hart blinked. Probably the first time someone had interrupted her pitch in years. I haven't finished. Don't need to hear it. Answers no. Mr. Vale, I don't think you understand the opportunity. I understand fine. He kept his voice level. The way he'd learned to do when staying calm was the difference between talking and fighting. You're offering me a position that would put me in meetings with people who make decisions. You want my name on reports and my face in rooms where strategy gets discussed. That's not an opportunity. That's exposure. Her eyes narrowed. Exposure to what? To you. He met her stare without flinching. To people like you. People who think everyone wants what they want. Money, power. A seat at the table. He shook his head. I don't want your table. I want to fix things that are broken and go home to my daughter. Your daughter? Sienna picked up a folder he hadn't noticed on her desk. Mila, 8 years old. You pick her up from Lincoln Elementary every day at 3:15. You're never late. Ice flooded his veins, but his expression didn't change. Couldn't change. That was a skill too, keeping your face blank when someone just showed you how much they knew, how much they'd looked. You had someone watch my kid? I had someone verify your schedule. She closed the folder. Due diligence, you'd do the same. No, I wouldn't. Ethan stepped forward, close enough that most people would have backed up. Sienna Hart didn't move. I don't dig into people's lives. I don't send someone to watch their children to make sure I know their pressure points. That's what you just did, whether you call it due diligence or not. I call it being thorough. I call it exactly why I'm saying no. He turned toward the door. Thanks for the offer. Don't make it again. Mr. Vale? We're done. He was 2 steps from the door when she spoke again, quieter this time. You're angry. I understand that. But you're also smart enough to know that turning down this position doesn't make sense unless you're hiding something. Ethan stopped but didn't turn around. Everyone's hiding something, Ms. Hart. You just don't usually care because it doesn't affect your bottom line. What are you hiding? For a moment, the only sound was the muted hum of the building's climate control, the system he'd optimized running smooth in the background of their standoff. Then Ethan looked back over his shoulder. The fact that I can do the job you're offering. Because the minute I do, the minute I step into that world, people start asking questions. They start looking deeper than my work history. And I worked really hard to be someone nobody looks at twice. He pulled the door open. I'm good where I am. Leave it alone. He left her standing there, walked past the assistant's perfect desk and her perfectly raised eyebrows, and stabbed the elevator button like it had personally offended him. His heart was doing something complicated in his chest. The old fight-or-flight response that never really went away no matter how many years you spent pretending to be normal. The elevator took 90 seconds to descend. He counted everyone. Oops. The apartment was quiet when Ethan got home 2 hours later, still shaking off the encounter like a bad coat. Mrs. Chen from 4B had Mila until he got there. Their arrangement for the days his shift ran long. She answered the door in her perpetual cardigan, smiling the way she always did. She's doing homework at the table. Already ate her snack. That girl, she could teach my grandson about manners. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. Ethan handed her the 20 he'd pulled from the ATM. She tried to wave it off like she always did. You're feeding her. Take it. You're a good father, Ethan. He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded and collected his daughter. Mila looked up from her math worksheet, face lighting up. Dad? I got 100 on my spelling test. Yeah, let me see. She pulled the paper from her folder with the kind of pride that made his chest tight. Perfect score, smiley face sticker, the teacher's looping excellent work across the top. Ethan studied it like it was a blueprint, taking in every detail. This word here, receive, that's a tricky one. I before E, except after C. Mila grinned, showing the gap where she'd lost a tooth 3 weeks ago. Mrs. Patterson says I'm the best speller in class. Mrs. Patterson's right. He kissed the top of her head, breathed in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. Finish your homework. I'll start dinner. Their apartment was small, 1 bedroom that Mila got, A living room where Ethan's fold-out couch pretended to be furniture. A kitchen barely big enough for both of them. But it was clean, and it was safe, and it was theirs. The windows didn't seal quite right, and the radiator clanked like it had personal grievances. But Mila had never gone hungry, and she'd never been afraid. That was all that mattered. Ethan pulled chicken from the freezer, started rice in the cooker, chopped vegetables with the efficient movements of someone who'd learned to cook out of necessity. Mila chattered from the table, something about her friend Sophie and the science fair project they were planning. He made the appropriate noises, asked the appropriate questions, kept his hands busy so his mind couldn't wander back to the 32nd floor. But it did anyway. You're overqualified for your job. Yeah, he was, and there was a reason for that. Dad? He looked up. Mila was watching him with those two old eyes, the ones that had learned to read his moods before she should have had to. 8 years old and already fluent in her father's silences. You okay? I'm good, kiddo. Just thinking about work. Did something bad happen? No, nothing bad. He forced a smile that probably didn't reach his eyes. Someone offered me a promotion today. Her face lit up. That's good, right? That means more money? Yeah, it does. So why do you look sad? Because the last time someone offered him something that looked good, it had cost him everything. Because saying yes meant questions he couldn't answer. Because powerful people didn't give you things for free. They bought you, and he'd sworn he was done being owned. I'm not taking it, he said instead. I like the job I have. Mila frowned, the way kids did when adults said things that didn't make sense. But if it's more money, couldn't we get a bigger place? You could have your own room. Ethan crossed to the table, crouched beside her chair. You know what I care about more than a bigger place? What? Picking you up from school at 3:15. Every single day. Being home for dinner. Helping with homework. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The job they offered would mean later nights. More meetings. Less time with you. That's not a trade I'm willing to make. She studied his face, serious in the way that always reminded him she was smarter than he gave her credit for. Promise you're not just saying that? Promise. Okay. She went back to her math, apparently satisfied. Sophie's mom is never home for dinner. She says her mom is important. Your mom was important too, Ethan said quietly. That didn't make it right. Mila didn't respond to that. She'd been too young when her mother died to remember much, which was maybe a mercy. Ethan had enough memories for both of them, most of them the kind that woke him up at 3 a.m, heart racing, reaching for weapons that weren't there anymore. He went back to the kitchen, finished cooking, and they ate dinner the way they always did. Mila talking about school, Ethan listening, both of them pretending this was a normal life built by a normal man. After dinner, after homework, after Mila's bath and bedtime story, and the complicated ritual of tucking in stuffed animals, Ethan finally had silence. He stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep, and felt the weight of every choice that had led here. 8 years ago, he'd been someone else. Someone with a different name and a different purpose and blood on his hands that no amount of penance would wash clean. Then one night in a parking garage, everything had changed. One choice, one person, one moment where he'd been something other than a weapon, and it had cost him everything. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but old instincts said that ignoring things didn't make them disappear. Yeah? Mr. Vale. Sienna Hart's voice, cool and composed, even at 9 p.m. I hope I'm not calling too late. How'd you get this number? The same way I got the rest of your information. I'm thorough, remember? A pause. I wanted to apologize, you were right. Having someone verify your schedule was invasive, regardless of my intentions. I overstepped. Ethan walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. Okay. Okay, you accept the apology? Or okay, you heard me say it. Haven't decided yet. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had been less controlled. Fair enough. The offer stands for what it's worth. Not because I'm trying to buy you or control you, because you're genuinely the best person for the position. And if I keep saying no, then you keep saying no. I don't force people into roles they don't want. She paused. But I do wonder what you're so afraid of. I'm not afraid. Respectfully, Mr. Vale, everyone who says that is lying, usually to themselves. Her voice softened slightly. I've built this company by taking risks on people who didn't think they deserved chances. Whatever you're running from, whatever you think disqualifies you, I've probably seen worse. You haven't seen this. Try me. For a second, he almost did. Almost told her about the man he used to be, the things he'd done, the reason he'd learned to disappear. But that was the exhaustion talking, the loneliness, the part of him that was tired of carrying it alone. Good night, Ms. Hart. He hung up before she could respond, before the conversation could go anywhere that would require more truth than he was willing to give. Then he stood at the window for a long time, watching the city pretend it was safe. 3 days later, Ethan was elbow deep in the building's water system when his radio crackled again. Vale, got a situation on 12. Conference room B, water leak through the ceiling. He swore quietly, grabbed his kit, and headed for the stairs. The elevator would be faster, but stairs meant he could think, and thinking meant he could prepare for whatever mess waited. Conference room 12B was chaos. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling tiles, pooling on the expensive carpet, ruining what looked like several $1,000s worth of presentation materials. A cluster of executives stood pressed against the far wall, looking at the ceiling like it had personally betrayed them. And standing in the middle of it all, shoes soaked, expression unreadable, Sienna Hart. Mr. Vale, she gestured at the ceiling. Please tell me you can fix this quickly. Depends on where it's coming from. Ethan set down his toolkit, started pulling out what he'd need. Everyone out. I need to cut into that ceiling. The executives filed out with the kind of indignation that came from people unused to being told what to do. Sienna stayed. That includes you, Ethan said without looking at her. It's my meeting. It's my leak. Out. For a moment he thought she'd argue. Then she walked to the door, paused. How long? 20 minutes to diagnose, another hour to patch it properly. He finally looked at her. You'll need a different room for your meeting. We're acquiring a property downtown. The seller's here now. This was supposed to impress him. Well, your ceiling's crying. Doesn't impress anybody. Ethan pulled a ladder from the hallway, started setting it up. Tell him you've got people who respond to emergencies. That impresses the right kind of buyer. Sienna tilted her head, studying him. You're very good at this. It's my job. I meant the part where you're completely calm while everything's falling apart around you. Things fall apart. Getting emotional doesn't fix them. He climbed the ladder, started carefully removing ceiling tiles. Water dripped cold on his neck. You should go. This is going to get worse before it gets better. She didn't leave. Instead, she moved some papers out of the water's path, salvaging what could be saved with the kind of efficiency that suggested she wasn't above getting her hands dirty when needed. You don't have to do that, Ethan said. I know, but standing around watching isn't my style. She stacked folders on a dry table. The offer's still open, by the way, director position. Still no. Can I ask why? And I don't mean the answers you gave me before. I mean the real reason. Ethan found the pipe joint that was failing, started assessing what he'd need to fix it. I told you the real reason. You told me pieces of it. Sienna moved closer to the ladder, looking up at him. But there's something else. Something you're not saying. Everyone's got things they don't say. True, but most people don't turn down life-changing money to protect their secrets. She handed him a wrench from his toolkit without being asked, like she'd been watching which tools he reached for. That's not normal caution. That's fear. You gonna psychoanalyze me or you gonna let me fix your leak? I can do both. I'm talented like that. Despite himself, Ethan almost smiled. There was something different about her like this. No audience, no performance, just a woman standing in a flooded conference room handing him tools. More real, less armor. Last time I took a promotion, he said quietly, I ended up somewhere I didn't want to be, doing things I didn't want to do, for people who didn't care what it cost me. He tightened the pipe joint, testing. I'm not doing that again. Not for you, not for anyone. I don't care how much money you offer. What if it's not about the money? It's always about the money, or power, or control. That's how your world works. My world, she repeated. What world is yours? Ethan climbed down the ladder, started digging through his kit for sealant. The one where I fix things and go home. That's not a world. That's hiding. He stopped, looked at her directly. Yeah, it is. Because the alternative is being seen, and I learned the hard way that being seen gets people hurt. Something shifted in her expression. Who got hurt? People who trusted me. People who thought I knew what I was doing. He went back to work, focusing on the pipe because looking at her was starting to feel dangerous. I'm good at being invisible, Ms. Hart. Let me stay that way. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I told you that you saved someone's life once, years ago, and that person never forgot it? Ethan's hand stopped moving. What if I told you that person has been looking for you for 8 years? Her voice was soft now, careful. And they finally found you, not because they want to control you or use you, but because they wanted to say thank you. I don't know what you're talking about, but his voice sounded wrong even to his own ears, too tight, too controlled. A parking garage. Late night. Someone being attacked. Sienna took a step closer. A man who intervened, who got hurt making sure she got away safely, who disappeared before anyone could help him. No, she couldn't know about that. He'd been careful. Different city, different name, different life. 8 years was supposed to be long enough to bury anything. That wasn't me. Ethan, that wasn't me, he repeated, harder this time. And whoever you think I am, you're wrong. He grabbed his toolkit, the leak half fixed but functional enough, and headed for the door. Sienna called after him, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because if she knew about the parking garage, she might know about what came before. What came after. Why a man with his skills was fixing pipes instead of doing the work he'd been trained for. And if she knew all that, then Mila wasn't safe anymore. The thought turned his blood cold. He took the stairs 3 at a time, heading for the basement, for the maintenance office, where he could lock the door and think. But when he got there, his supervisor was waiting with an expression that meant bad news. Vale, we got a problem. Can it wait? Not really. Building inspection showed some irregularities in the documentation for the HVAC work you did last winter. They're asking questions. Ethan felt something dark settle in his chest. What kind of questions? The kind where they want to see your certifications, your background, your work history before Meridian. The supervisor shrugged apologetically. I vouched for you, told them you're solid, but they're insisting on the paperwork. When? End of the week. 4 days. 4 days to produce documentation that would fall apart under any serious scrutiny because the man named Ethan Vale had only existed for 3 years and his work history before that was held together with carefully constructed lies. I'll take care of it, Ethan said, but he was already calculating exit strategies. How fast he could pull Mila from school, where they could go that wouldn't leave a trail, how much cash he had on hand. Running. Again. He made it home on autopilot, picked up Mila from Mrs. Chen, cooked dinner, helped with homework. Normal. Everything normal. But inside, his mind was racing through contingencies, through the careful plans he'd made for exactly this scenario. After Mila went to bed, he pulled the go bag from the back of his closet. Passports. 2 of them, different names, good enough to fool most checks. Cash. Enough to get them across state lines, maybe further. Contacts, people who owed him favors, who could help them disappear if necessary. Everything he'd promised himself he wouldn't need again. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but different from Sienna's. Against his better judgment, he answered. Ethan Vale. A man's voice, professional, clipped. My name is Marcus Webb. I work for Sienna Hart. I'm calling to inform you that the building inspection has been resolved. The irregularities were clerical errors on the city's part, not yours. You won't need to provide additional documentation. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. How did that get resolved in 4 hours? Ms. Hart made some calls. She has connections in the building department. A pause. She also asked me to tell you that she's sorry for pushing, for bringing up things you clearly didn't want discussed, and that the job offer is officially withdrawn. She won't contact you again about it. The relief should have been immediate. Instead, Ethan felt something complicated and unwelcome. She fixed the inspection problem? Yes, sir. Completely handled. You're clear. Why? Because she said you were right, that you wanted to be left alone. And she's trying to respect that, even if it took her too long to figure out she should. Webb sounded almost amused. For what it's worth, she doesn't usually back down from things. You must have made an impression. Ethan stared at the go bag on his bed, at the evidence of a life spent ready to run. Tell her I said thanks. Will do. Good night, Mr. Vale. The line went dead. Ethan sat there for a long time, holding the phone, trying to understand why someone like Sienna Hart would use her connections to protect someone who'd done nothing but refuse her. It didn't make sense. Powerful people didn't spend favors on maintenance contractors who said no. Unless she really did know about the parking garage. Unless she really was trying to say thank you. The memory came back sharp and unwanted. A woman's scream cutting through the dark, his body moving before his brain could catch up. 3 men with knives and worse intentions. He'd put 2 of them down hard, took a blade across the ribs from the third before he could disarm him. The woman, young, terrified, executive clothes and heels that weren't made for running, had stared at him like he was something between a savior and a monster. "Go," he'd told her, pressing his hand against the wound in his side. "Run. Don't look back." She'd hesitated, pulled out her phone like she was going to call for help. "Don't. Just go. Forget this happened. Forget you saw me." And she'd run. He'd collapsed against a concrete pillar, listening to her footsteps echo into nothing, and wondered if this was finally the mistake that would kill him. But he'd made it to his car, made it to someone who could stitch him up without asking questions, and he'd disappeared into a new identity before anyone could connect the dots. 8 years ago, different city, different life. If that woman had been Sienna Hart, no. It didn't change anything. She was still CEO of a major company. He was still a man with a past that couldn't survive scrutiny, and Mila was still the only thing that mattered. Ethan put the go bag back in the closet, but he didn't unpack it, just in case, because powerful people who said they'd leave you alone rarely meant it. And Sienna Hart hadn't gotten where she was by giving up on things she wanted. 3 weeks passed like held breath. Ethan kept his head down, did his work, picked up Mila at 3:15 every day without fail. The building inspection issue never resurfaced. Sienna Hart didn't call again. Life returned to the careful routine he'd built, and he told himself that was enough. It wasn't. The problem with quiet was that it gave you too much time to think, and thinking led to questions Ethan didn't want to answer. Questions like why Sienna had really backed off, why she'd used favors to protect him instead of just finding someone else for her director position, why a CEO would care about one maintenance contractor who told her no, unless she really did know about the parking garage. He was running diagnostics on the building's electrical system when his radio crackled with a voice he didn't recognize. "Maintenance, this is Detective Carver with Metro PD. I need someone to let me into the basement security office." Ethan's hand stopped halfway to a circuit breaker. Police in the building wasn't unusual. Meridian had corporate tenants, occasional investigations, subpoenas that needed serving, but they didn't usually call maintenance. "Copy that? Give me 5 minutes." He took the stairs slowly, using the time to smooth his expression into something forgettably helpful. The detective waiting at the basement entrance was maybe 50, tired eyes, cheap suit that had seen better days, not the kind of cop who worked corporate cases. "Ethan Vale?" "That's me. What do you need?" Carver showed his badge. More formality than threat. "Access to your security footage. We're investigating an incident at a property your company manages downtown. Need to cross-reference some timestamps. You'll need to talk to security for that. I just fix things. Security's already involved. They said you're the one who actually knows how the system works." Carver pulled out a small notebook, flipped it open. "Had a break-in last week at the Meridian building on 5th Street. No forced entry, which means whoever got in knew what they were doing. Your security director suggested you might be able to tell us if the footage was tampered with." Ethan unlocked the security office, a cramped room full of monitors and recording equipment that most people found intimidating. He found it comforting. Machines didn't lie unless someone made them, and you could usually tell when they had been made to. "What day?" he asked. "Last Tuesday, between midnight and 3 a.m. Ethan pulled up the logs, started scanning through the data with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to read digital footprints in a different context. The footage was there, timestamps intact, but something felt wrong. The file sizes were inconsistent. "This section here," he pointed at the screen. "From 115 to 143. The resolution's different. Someone replaced the original footage with a loop." Carver leaned closer. "Can you tell what they were hiding?" "Not from this. They knew what they were doing, kept the lighting consistent, matched the ambient movement. Professional work." Ethan pulled up another screen, started checking backup systems. "But whoever did it didn't know we have a redundant system. Secondary recordings that most people don't know about." "And you know about them because?" Because I installed them. Ethan found the backup files, started the recovery process. Give me 20 minutes. I can get you the real footage. Carver settled into a chair, watching him work with the kind of patience that came from years of waiting. You're pretty good at this. How long you been doing security work? I don't do security work. I do maintenance. This is just part of the system. Right, maintenance. The detective's tone suggested he wasn't buying it, but he didn't push. Ms. Hart speaks highly of you, says you're the best contractor they've ever had. Ethan's fingers hesitated on the keyboard for just a fraction of a second. You talked to Ms. Hart about me? She's been very helpful with the investigation, gave us full access to everything, no warrant needed, even offered to have her people assist. Carver pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. She specifically mentioned you, said if anyone could recover tampered footage, it'd be you. The recovered footage appeared on screen, grainy but clear enough. 3 figures in dark clothing moving through the 5th Street building with the confidence of people who knew exactly where they were going. They went straight to a specific office, spent 18 minutes inside, then left the way they came. That office belonged to anyone important? Ethan asked. Lawrence Chen, Meridian's chief financial officer. Carver stood, studying the screen. He reported some documents missing the next morning. Nothing that seemed critical at the time, but Ms. Hart's concerned there might be more to it. Ethan froze the footage on the clearest frame of one of the intruders. Something about the way the person moved triggered recognition, the kind that came from training most people didn't have. Military gait, possibly special operations, weight distribution that suggested someone comfortable with weapons. You should send this to Federal, he said quietly. Why? Because those aren't regular thieves. Look at the way they move. Formation spacing, hand signals, threat assessment patterns. That's tactical training. Carver's expression sharpened. How do you know what tactical training looks like? And there it was. The question Ethan had been avoiding since the conversation started. He could lie. Probably should lie. But something told him this detective was the type who'd check. Military, he said, which was technically true even if it left out the parts that mattered. Long time ago. Different life. What branch? Army. I'd rather not talk about it. Carver studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. A lot of guys don't like talking about it. He pulled out his card, handed it to Ethan. If you notice anything else strange, give me a call. And thanks for the help. You just saved me about 3 weeks of waiting on tech guys who don't know half what you do. After the detective left, Ethan sat in the security office staring at the frozen image on the screen. Professional break-in. CFO's office. Documents stolen. And Sienna Hart personally recommending him to the investigation. He pulled out his phone, stared at it for a full minute, then dialed the number he'd sworn he wouldn't use. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Vale, I'm surprised to hear from you. Why'd you tell the police about me? Because you're good at what you do, and they needed good. No hesitation, no defensiveness. Was I wrong? You put me in a room with a detective asking questions about my background. He was asking about security systems, not your past. And you handled it fine from what he told me. A pause. Unless there's something about your past you're particularly worried about him finding? Ethan closed his eyes, pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose. What are you doing, Ms. Hart? My job. Someone broke into my building and stole from my CFO. I'm trying to figure out who and why. No, I mean with me. The inspection problem, the detective, keeping your distance but not really. What are you doing? When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more careful. Can we meet? Somewhere that's not my office or your basement, somewhere neutral. Why? Because I think we need to have a conversation we're not having over the phone, and because I owe you more honesty than I've been giving. She waited. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from Meridian, Brennan's. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., before you start your shift. I pick up Mila at 3:15. I'm never late. I know. I wouldn't ask you to be. Something in her tone shifted. Please, Ethan, one conversation. After that, if you want me to leave you alone for real this time, I will. He should say no. Should hang up and go back to his carefully constructed invisibility. But the way she'd said his name, not Mr. Vale, just Ethan, made him remember the woman in the parking garage 8 years ago, terrified and shaking, looking at him like he was the only thing standing between her and something terrible. 7 a.m., he said. One conversation. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Brennan's at 6:55. Old habit, arrive early, assess the space, identify exits. The coffee shop was the kind of place that catered to morning commuters, decent coffee and pastries that didn't pretend to be fancy. Sienna was already there, sitting in a back corner booth, no laptop, no phone, visible. Just a woman drinking coffee and looking less like a CEO than he'd ever seen her. She'd traded the power suits for jeans and a sweater. Her hair was down. She looked younger, more uncertain. "Thanks for coming," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. "You bought me coffee, or is this a pay-for-yourself situation?" A brief smile. "I bought. Black, no sugar, your usual order at the break room." "You know my coffee order?" "I told you. I'm thorough." But this time it didn't sound like a threat, just a statement of fact. "I had them bring pastries too, but I don't know if you eat breakfast." Ethan looked at the plate between them. Croissants, muffins, something with fruit he didn't recognize. "I eat cereal with my daughter before she goes to school. Then these are for me, and I'm sharing badly." Sienna picked up her coffee, wrapped both hands around it like she needed the warmth. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you decide I'm crazy or manipulative or whatever else you're thinking." "I'm listening." She took a breath. 8 years ago, I was working late at our downtown office. It was my first year with the company, just out of business school, trying to prove I deserved to be there. I stayed until almost midnight reviewing contracts. Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened around the cup. "The parking garage was empty when I left. Or I thought it was. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me." Ethan's throat went dry, but he didn't interrupt. 3 men. I didn't see them coming until it was too late. They had knives, and they knew what they wanted. My purse, my phone, my car keys. I gave them everything. But that wasn't enough. She looked down at her coffee. One of them grabbed me, said I was coming with them. And I knew what that meant. The memory slammed back hard. The sound of her scream, the way time had compressed into a single crystal moment of decision. Help her or walk away. Get involved or stay invisible. Then someone appeared, a man. He didn't say anything, didn't warn them, just moved. Sienna finally looked up, met his eyes. He put 2 of them down before I even processed what was happening. The third one had a knife, slashed at him, got him across the ribs. But it didn't stop him. Nothing stopped him. He disarmed the guy, knocked him unconscious, and then he turned to me. Ethan couldn't breathe. He was bleeding. I could see it spreading across his shirt. I tried to help, tried to call 911, but he wouldn't let me. Just told me to run. To forget it happened. To forget him. Her voice cracked slightly. So I ran. Because I was terrified and in shock, and I didn't know what else to do. And I've regretted it every day since. Sienna. I tried to find him, went back to the garage, talked to building security, filed a police report. But there was no record of anyone fitting his description working in the building. No footage. Someone had already wiped it. No evidence he'd ever existed except for the 3 unconscious men and the blood on the concrete. She set down her coffee. I hired investigators, spent years and more money than I want to admit trying to find the man who saved my life. And I never did, until 3 months ago. Ethan's mind was racing. 3 months ago was when he'd started at Meridian, when he'd fixed the HVAC crisis and caught Sienna's attention. I was reviewing employee files, doing my usual due diligence, and there was something about your photo, something familiar. Then I read about what you did during the HVAC crisis, the way you handled yourself under pressure, the way you moved through the building like you knew exactly where every threat could come from. And I wondered. She pulled out her phone, opened a photo. I had our security team pull footage from that night. This is the clearest frame they could find. She turned the phone toward him. The image was grainy, shadows, and poor lighting, but it showed a man's profile. Dark hair, strong jaw, the kind of build that came from serious training. It was him. 8 years younger, different haircut, no scar across his knuckles from a repair job gone wrong. But it was definitely him. I compared it to your photo, your current one. She swiped to show them side by side. It's not perfect. 8 years changes people. But the bone structure, the way you carry yourself, it's the same person. Ethan stared at the images, feeling the walls he'd built start to crack. Then I dug deeper. Not into your background. I knew that would be a dead end. but into that night. I found the police reports from the hospital where those 3 men ended up. Turns out they weren't random muggers. They were working for someone, part of a larger operation. The police suspected human trafficking but could never prove it. She put the phone away. The detective on the case noted something strange. All 3 men had injuries consistent with someone with advanced combat training. Not self-defense, professional fighting. Why are you telling me this? Because you saved my life, and then disappeared. And I think I know why. Sienna leaned forward slightly. Whatever you were before that night, whoever you were working for or running from, it made you help me when you shouldn't have. Made you risk exposure to save a stranger. And it cost you something, didn't it? The scar on his ribs seemed to burn, but that wasn't the cost she meant. I had a partner, he said quietly, the words coming out before he could stop them. We worked together, trusted each other. After the parking garage, after I helped you, someone found out. Someone who didn't like that I'd broken protocol. His hands curled into fists under the table. They went after her to get to me. Used her to send a message about what happens when you step out of line. Mila's mother. He nodded. Sarah. She didn't know the details of what I did, but she knew enough to be dangerous. And when they couldn't find me, they found her instead. His voice went flat, emotionless. The only way to get through it. By the time I got there, it was too late. She was dying. But she'd hidden Mila, kept her safe. Her last words were about making sure our daughter had a better life than we did. Sienna's face had gone pale. I'm so sorry. Don't be. It wasn't your fault. Ethan met her eyes. It was mine. I made the choice to help you. I knew the risks, and I did it anyway. And Sarah paid the price. That's why you disappeared. Why you became someone new. I had a daughter who needed a father more than the world needed another killer. He said it bluntly, watching her reaction. That's what I was, Ms. Hart. Before the parking garage, before Sarah, before everything. I was the person they sent when they needed someone to disappear permanently. I was good at it. Too good. He expected horror, disgust, the look people got when they realized what he really was. Instead, Sienna just nodded slowly. And you walked away from that life to raise Mila. I didn't walk away. I burned it down. Made myself useless to them. Became someone so thoroughly unremarkable that they'd have no reason to look twice. He gestured at himself. Ethan Vale, facilities contractor, single father. Works hard, keeps quiet, doesn't cause problems. The kind of person you forget 5 minutes after meeting. I didn't forget you. You didn't know me. You knew the man who helped you one night. That's not the same thing. Sienna picked up a croissant, tore off a small piece but didn't eat it. I built this company into what it is because I take risks on people everyone else overlooks. I hire ex-cons who can't get jobs anywhere else. I promote people without perfect credentials because they work harder than anyone else. I believe in second chances. She looked at him steadily. What I don't believe in is wasting potential, and you, Ethan Vale, are wasting yours by hiding in my basement. My potential was used up a long time ago. No, your past was. Those aren't the same thing. She ate the piece of croissant, took her time chewing. The job offer is still withdrawn. I meant what I said about leaving you alone, but I want you to understand something first. What's that? You didn't ruin my life that night in the parking garage. You saved it, and not just because you stopped those men. You saved it because you showed me what courage actually looks like. Her voice was firm now, no uncertainty. I was 22 years old, working for my father's company, trying to prove I belonged, and I was terrified every single day that someone would figure out I was faking it, that I didn't have what it took. You seemed pretty confident when you were offering me a director position. 8 years of practice, a slight smile. But that night changed something. I watched someone risk everything for a stranger, and it made me realize that real strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. Ethan looked out the window at the city waking up, people hurrying to jobs and lives and problems that probably seemed overwhelming to them. Normal problems. The kind he'd never have. I'm not a hero, Sienna. I'm a guy who made one decent choice in a lifetime of bad ones. Maybe. But that one choice mattered. She finished her coffee, set the cup down gently. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm not asking you to take the job or change your life or risk your daughter's safety. I just wanted you to know, that I remember, and that if you ever need anything, anything at all, you don't have to face it alone. Why would you do that? Because 8 years ago, you helped me when you didn't have to. Now it's my turn. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning rush building around them, the noise of the coffee shop providing cover for a conversation neither of them could have had anywhere else. Finally, Ethan said, "Those men who broke into the 5th Street building, the detective showed me the footage." "I know. He said you identified them as having tactical training. More than that, I recognized the formation pattern. It's specific to a contractor group I used to know. They hire out for corporate espionage, political blackmail, occasional wet work." He met her eyes. "If they're targeting Meridian, it's not about stolen documents. It's about something bigger." Sienna's expression went cold and calculating, the CEO sliding back into place. "Do you know who they're working for?" "No, but I know how they operate. They don't make moves unless someone's paying serious money, and they don't stop until they get what they came for." He hesitated. "You should bring in real security, people who know how to handle this kind of threat." "I have security." "You have security guards who check IDs and respond to break-ins. This is different. These are professionals." "Then help me." She said it simply, not a demand or manipulation, just a request. "You know how they think. You know what to look for. Help me protect my company. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to consult. Point me in the right direction. You don't have to get your hands dirty." She pulled out a folder he hadn't noticed her carrying. "This is everything we know about the break-in. Review it, tell me what you see. That's all." Ethan looked at the folder like it was a loaded weapon. "If I do this, if I help you, it puts me back on a radar I spent 8 years getting off. Then we'll be careful. Ghost consulting, no name attached, no official involvement, just you and me and whatever you're willing to share." She pushed the folder across the table. "Please, I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for the 300 people who work for Meridian, the families depending on those jobs, the clients trusting us with their investments." It was a good pitch, probably rehearsed, but the look in her eyes wasn't practiced. It was genuine concern mixed with something that looked like faith. Faith that he could help, that he was worth the risk. Ethan picked up the folder, felt its weight in his hands. "I'll look at it. No promises beyond that. That's all I'm asking." He stood, tucked the folder under his arm. "I need to get to work, and you probably have meetings or corporate things to do." "Probably." Sienna stood too, smaller than him but somehow taking up more space. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For that night, for today, for everything you've given up to keep Mila safe." She held out her hand, formal now, businesslike. "It matters." He shook her hand, felt the strength in her grip, and wondered if he was making another terrible mistake or finally doing something right. That evening, after Mila was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Ethan opened the folder. Police reports, security logs, financial documents, email chains, the evidence of something wrong threading through Meridian like rot in a foundation. He read for 3 hours, old skills clicking back into place. Pattern recognition, threat assessment, the ability to see connections where other people saw coincidence. And what he saw made his blood run cold. The break-in at 5th Street wasn't random. It was reconnaissance. Someone was mapping Meridian's financial structure, looking for weaknesses, preparing for something bigger. The stolen documents were CFO reports on a major acquisition Sienna was negotiating, a property deal in Singapore worth hundreds of millions. But it was the email chain that worried him most. Messages between Lawrence Chen and an external account, discussing project timelines and security protocols. Innocent on the surface, damning if you knew what to look for. Meridian had a mole, someone on the inside feeding information to whoever was running the operation. And if Ethan was right about which contractor group was involved, they weren't just after money. They were after control, leverage, the kind of intelligence that could destroy a company or bend it to someone else's will. He pulled out his phone, stared at Sienna's number. It was almost midnight. She'd be asleep. This could wait until morning, but morning might be too late. He called. She answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. "Ethan, what's wrong? You have a problem bigger than you thought." "How big?" "Big enough that we need to meet. Tomorrow. Somewhere private." He looked at the documents spread across his coffee table, Evidence of the life he'd left behind reaching back to pull him in. And you need to be ready to hear things you're not going to like. There was a pause, then her voice came back sharp and focused. My office, 6 a.m., before anyone else gets there. Okay. Ethan, should I be worried? He thought about the contractor group he'd recognized, the mole in her company, the acquisition deal that someone was willing to kill for. He thought about Mila sleeping in the next room, safe for now, but not if this went sideways. Yeah, he said quietly. You should be worried. Ethan arrived at Meridian Tower at 5:45, when the lobby was still empty except for the overnight security guard who barely glanced at his badge. The building felt different in the pre-dawn dark, less glass and steel monument to corporate success, more hollow shell waiting to be filled with people and purpose. He took the stairs to 32, needing the physical exertion to burn off the tension that had kept him awake most of the night. Sienna was already in her office, still wearing yesterday's clothes, hair pulled back in a messy knot. Coffee cups littered her desk alongside laptops and file folders. She looked up when he entered, and the exhaustion in her eyes told him she hadn't slept either. You've been here all night, he said. So have you, from the looks of it. She gestured to the empty chair across from her desk. Tell me what you found. Ethan pulled out the folder now marked up with his notes, lines connecting documents and patterns only he could see. Your CFO is dirty. Lawrence Chen has been communicating with an external party about the Singapore acquisition. Timing, security protocols, financial projections, everything someone would need to sabotage the deal or position themselves to benefit from inside information. Sienna's face went carefully blank, the way people did when they were processing something that hurt. Lawrence has been with this company for 12 years. He worked with my father before I took over. Which makes him the perfect mole. Nobody would suspect him. Ethan spread 3 pages across her desk. Look at these email timestamps. Every message to the external account came within hours of your strategy meetings about Singapore. He's reporting in real time. The external account, can we trace it? Encrypted through multiple relays, offshore servers, the whole setup. Whoever Chen's talking to knows how to stay hidden. He pulled out another document. But here's what worries me more. The contractor group I recognized from the break-in footage, they don't work cheap. Someone's paying them serious money, which means this isn't just corporate espionage. They're building to something bigger. Sienna picked up one of the emails, read it slowly. Her jaw tightened. The Singapore deal closes in 6 days. We're acquiring a property portfolio worth $400 million. If someone sabotages it, Meridian could lose everything we've built in the last 2 years. It's worse than that. Ethan pointed to a financial projection in Chen's files. Look at this analysis. It's not about stopping the acquisition. It's about forcing you to accept unfavorable terms from a specific buyer, someone who wants the Singapore properties but doesn't want to pay fair market value. So they're manufacturing a crisis to drive down the price and make me desperate enough to sell. Understanding flooded her expression. That's why the break-in was so surgical. They took exactly what they needed to understand our negotiating position. And now they're waiting for the right moment to strike. My guess? They'll hit you sometime in the next 48 hours, right when you're most vulnerable in the negotiation process. Ethan leaned back. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Sienna stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city beginning to wake. I should fire Chen, bring in the police, let them handle it. You could, but then whoever's running this operation just finds another way in. They've already invested too much to walk away empty. He watched her reflection in the glass. Or you could use what we know. Feed Chen false information, make them think they have the advantage, then flip the script when they make their move. She turned to face him. That's not just consultant advice, that's operational planning. Yeah, it is. I thought you weren't that person anymore. Ethan stood too, restless energy making it impossible to sit still. I'm not, but I'm also not going to watch you get destroyed by the kind of people I used to work with. They're predators, Sienna, and right now you look like prey. So what do you suggest? He'd spent the last 3 hours of the night working through scenarios, contingencies, the kind of tactical planning he'd sworn he'd never do again. Old habits didn't just die hard. They never really died at all, just waited for the right crisis to resurrect them. We set a trap. Let Chen think he's still operating in the dark. Feed him information that makes the operation seem like it's proceeding on schedule. Then we identify who he's working with and take them down before they can execute whatever they're planning. How do we identify them? We trace the money. Contractors like this don't work on promises. They want payment up front, usually in cryptocurrency or offshore accounts. Chen has to be facilitating transfers. If we can access his financial records, we can follow the trail. Sienna walked back to her desk, pulled up something on her laptop. I have access to all employee financial accounts through our payroll system, but looking at Chen's without cause could be illegal. Being illegal hasn't stopped whoever's coming after you. No, but I'm not them. She met his eyes. I won't compromise my ethics just to win. That's not who I am. It was naive, the kind of idealism that got people killed in the world Ethan had come from. But it was also exactly why he'd helped her 8 years ago. Because some people still believed in doing things the right way, even when the right way was harder. Then we get creative. Chen's using company resources to communicate with external parties. That's a violation of your IT policy. You have legal grounds to monitor his activity. That would require involving IT. More people who could leak information or ask questions we can't answer. Not if I do it myself. Ethan pulled out his phone, started typing. I have system admin access for maintenance purposes. Technically, I'm authorized to monitor network traffic for security concerns. Technically? Meaning it's a gray area, but not outright illegal. He looked up. Your call. We can do this the clean way and probably lose, or we can do it the effective way and deal with the consequences later. Sienna was quiet for a long moment, weighing options the way CEOs did when every choice felt like a betrayal of something. Finally, she nodded. Do it, but Ethan, I need your word that we stop if this crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. You have it. He spent the next 2 hours in the basement server room, pulling network logs and tracing Chen's digital footprint with the kind of precision that came from years of hunting people who didn't want to be found. The CFO had been careful, using encrypted apps and VPNs, but careful wasn't the same as invisible. Everyone left traces. You just had to know where to look. By 8 a.m., when his building started filling with employees, Ethan had what he needed. Chen's financial transfers over the last 3 months showed a pattern. Small amounts, frequent intervals, all routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The total added up to almost $2 million. He called Sienna from the server room. I've got it. Chen's been paid nearly $2 million in the last 90 days. Can you trace where it came from? Working on it, but I need something from you first. What? Access to your Singapore acquisition files. The complete package, contracts, buyer information, negotiation history, everything. Why? Because whoever's paying Chen wants those properties. If I can identify which buyer has the most to gain from sabotaging your deal, I can work backwards to confirm the connection. Sienna hesitated. Those files are confidential. Releasing them could violate non-disclosure agreements. I'm not releasing them. I'm reviewing them. There's a difference. Another pause. Then, I'll have them sent to a secure folder you can access. But Ethan, this stays between us. If anyone finds out we're investigating Chen before we have solid proof, this whole thing falls apart. Understood. He hung up and went back to work, diving into the acquisition files when they arrived 20 minutes later. 3 potential buyers for the Singapore portfolio, all legitimate corporations with documented interest. But one stood out, Vertex Holdings, a real estate investment firm with ties to several questionable offshore entities. Ethan cross-referenced Vertex's corporate structure with the shell company paying Chen. It took another hour of digging through layers of ownership documents and financial filings, but the connection was there. Vertex Holdings was ultimately controlled by the same parent company that owned Chen's Cayman Islands shell. They weren't just trying to sabotage Sienna's deal. They were positioning themselves to swoop in and acquire the properties at a fraction of their value after Meridian's negotiating position collapsed. He was pulling together the evidence when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Vale. A man's voice, smooth and professional. We should talk. Every instinct Ethan had developed over 8 years of staying invisible started screaming. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're doing, and someone who'd prefer you stopped before this gets complicated. The server room suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Ethan stood, moved to where he could see the door. You've got the wrong guy. I don't think so. Former military contractor, Currently employed as facilities maintenance at Meridian Tower, helping CEO Sienna Hart investigate her CFO. That sound like the wrong guy to you? Ice flooded his veins. What do you want? For you to walk away. Ms. Hart is interfering with a business transaction that doesn't concern her. If she's smart, she'll accept Vertex's revised offer when it comes. If she's not, things will get unpleasant. You don't want to be in the middle of that. And if I don't walk away? The voice hardened. Then we'll have to revisit some old history. Make sure certain people know where to find Ethan Vale. Or should I say, where to find Marcus Webb. The name hit like a physical blow. Marcus Webb was who he'd been before, the identity he'd burned so completely he'd thought it was buried forever. Hearing it spoken aloud felt like watching his past claw its way out of a grave. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell me, does Mila still go to Lincoln Elementary? Does Mrs. Chen still pick her up when you're running late? A pause that felt like a threat. Walk away, Mr. Vale. Take your daughter and disappear like you're so good at. Nobody has to get hurt. The line went dead. Ethan stood there, phone pressed to his ear, feeling the careful life he'd built start to crack apart. They knew about Mila. Knew where she went to school. Knew enough to destroy everything if he didn't back down. He should run. Should grab his daughter and the go bag and disappear into a new identity in a new city. It's what he'd always planned to do if the past caught up with him. But running meant leaving Sienna to face this alone. Meant letting the people who'd threatened his daughter think they could use her as leverage whenever they wanted. Meant teaching Mila that when things got dangerous, you abandoned the people who needed you. He thought about Sarah, dying on a warehouse floor, using her last breath to tell him to give their daughter a better life. A life where her father was someone worth looking up to, not just someone who knew how to run. Ethan made his decision. He called Sienna. We have a problem. They know I'm helping you. How? Doesn't matter. What matters is they just threatened Mila to get me to back off. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need security at Lincoln Elementary. Someone watching my daughter until this is over. Not obvious, not intrusive, just eyes on her to make sure nobody gets close. I'll have my best people there in 30 minutes. No questions, no hesitation. What else? Keep Chen in the dark. Let him think everything's normal. I'm going to find out who called me and make sure they understand that threatening my daughter was the worst mistake they could have made. Ethan, if you're thinking about doing something, I'm thinking about protecting my family. Everything else is secondary. He disconnected before she could argue, before the part of him that still wanted to be good could talk him out of what he was about to do. The phone that had called him was a burner, untraceable through normal means. But Ethan had access to tools that weren't normal. He pulled up the building's cell tower logs, isolated the signal, and started triangulating. It took 20 minutes, but he found it. A location 3 blocks from Meridian, a coffee shop with outdoor seating. He was out of the server room and moving before he could think better of it. Old training took over, the predatory focus he'd tried to bury coming back like muscle memory. He didn't take the elevator, didn't sign out, just disappeared into the service corridors and out a side exit that most people didn't know existed. The coffee shop was crowded with morning business, laptops and lattes, and people who had no idea what was happening 3 tables away. Ethan spotted him immediately, 40-something, expensive suit, face that had seen some violence but not recently. He sat alone, phone on the table, watching the door like he'd been waiting. Ethan walked straight to the table, sat down uninvited. The man smiled. Mr. Vale, I was hoping you'd be reasonable and ignore my call. Guess I was wrong. You threatened my daughter. I gave you a warning. There's a difference. He picked up his coffee, took a sip. I'm impressed you found me this fast. That kind of skill set is rare. Shame you're wasting it on maintenance work. Who are you working for? You know I can't tell you that. Professional courtesy and all. The man set down his coffee. But I can tell you that you're on the wrong side of this. Vertex Holdings has significant resources, and they're willing to use them. Ms. Hart should take their offer. It's generous considering the alternative. And the alternative is? Her company collapses. The Singapore deal falls apart. Meridian Properties becomes worthless, and Vertex acquires the assets for pennies on the dollar. He leaned forward. You know how this works. You used to do it yourself. Why the sudden attack of conscience? Because I have a daughter who deserves better than a father who helps people like you. Noble. Stupid, but noble. The man pulled an envelope from his jacket, slid it across the table. There's $200,000 in cryptocurrency keys in there. Take it, take your daughter, and disappear. Nobody follows you, nobody asks questions, clean break. Ethan looked at the envelope. $200,000 would buy them years of safety, new identities, new city, a head start nobody could trace. He pushed it back. Not interested. Then you're a fool. Probably. Ethan stood. But I'm a fool who knows exactly what kind of contractor you are. And I know that you don't make threats you're not prepared to follow through on. So here's mine. You come near my daughter, you come near anyone I care about, and I'll remind you why people used to be afraid of Marcus Webb. The man's smile faded. You're not him anymore. You're a single father playing maintenance man. That version of you is dead. Maybe, but he's buried pretty shallow. And if you make me dig him up, a lot of people are going to regret it. Ethan leaned close enough that nobody else could hear. Walk away. Tell Vertex to find another target, because if this escalates, I won't stop until everyone involved is either in prison or too scared to ever come after what's mine again. He left before the man could respond, walked 3 blocks, ducked into an alley, and called Detective Carver. Vale? What's up? That break-in at 5th Street. I've got new information. Ethan gave him the coffee shop location, the description of the man he'd just confronted. He's connected to it. Threatened me when I got too close to figuring out who's behind it. You get a name? No, but I've got evidence tying Meridian's CFO to a shell company that's been paying him off. And I've got proof that Vertex Holdings is orchestrating the whole thing to sabotage a property acquisition. Carver was quiet for a moment. That's corporate espionage, maybe conspiracy. You want to come in and make a formal statement? Not yet. I need 48 hours to shore up the evidence. If I move too fast, they'll destroy everything and disappear. 48 hours is a long time for things to go wrong. I know, but it's what I need. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of everything he'd set in motion. Can you have someone watching Lincoln Elementary? I've got private security there, but police presence would help. Your daughter? Yeah. I'll have a patrol car do extra passes. Off the books. Carver's voice gentled. Vale, if you're in over your head, I'm not. I'm exactly deep enough. Just need to make sure Mila stays safe while I finish this. He hung up and started walking back to Meridian, mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. The man at the coffee shop would report back to whoever was running the operation. They'd know Ethan wasn't backing down, which meant they'd escalate. The question was how. His phone buzzed. Sienna. Security's in place at the school. 2 of my people, both former police, both armed. They'll stay until you tell me otherwise. Thank you. Ethan, what happened? You sound different. I confronted someone. Made some threats I might not be able to back up. He stopped at a corner, waited for the light. Things are going to get worse before they get better. Are you ready for that? Are you asking if I'm going to back down? I'm asking if you understand that people might get hurt. That this stopped being about business the minute they threatened Mila. Sienna was quiet. Then, what do you need from me? Act normal. Keep Chen thinking everything's fine. And when the time comes, be ready to move fast. When is the time coming? My guess? Tomorrow. They'll hit you at the Singapore negotiation meeting. Try to force your hand with some manufactured crisis that makes their offer look like your only option. How do you know? Because it's what I would do. He crossed the street, headed for Meridian's employee entrance. Get some rest, Sienna. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. That night, Ethan picked up Mila from school like always, but this time he clocked the 2 security personnel Sienna had sent. A woman reading a magazine in a car across the street, a man walking a dog that looked too well trained to be a pet. Good placement. Professional. They'd spot trouble before it got close. Dad, there's a police car outside school, Mila said as they walked home. Is something wrong? No, kiddo, just extra patrols. Nothing to worry about. You're lying. He looked down at her, 8 years old and already too perceptive. Yeah, I am. But only because the truth would scare you, and I don't want you to be scared. She thought about this. Are we in danger? Ethan stopped walking, crouched down to her level. I'm handling something, work stuff. It might get complicated, but I promise you, nothing is going to happen to you. I've made sure of it. What about you? Could something happen to you? The question hit harder than it should have. I'm going to be fine. That's what Mom said. Mila's eyes were too old, too knowing. Before she wasn't. He pulled her into a hug, fierce and tight. Your mom was protecting you from people who wanted to hurt her. I'm protecting you from people who want to hurt someone else. It's different. But you're still going to fight them. Yeah, I am. Why? Why can't we just leave like we always do? Because he was tired of running, tired of teaching her that the only response to danger was to disappear, tired of being someone his daughter couldn't respect. Because sometimes running doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes you have to stand and fix what's broken. He pulled back, looked at her seriously. And because I owe someone a debt I can never really repay, this is how I try. Mila studied his face. The lady from your work, Ms. Hart. Yeah. She must be important. She is, but not as important as you. He stood, took her hand. Come on, let's get home. I'll make your favorite dinner. Mac and cheese with the good breadcrumbs? The fancy kind that costs too much, because tonight we're celebrating. Celebrating what? The fact that tomorrow I'm going to do something that scares me, and you're going to be brave while I do it. They walked home hand in hand, father and daughter, pretending that everything was normal even though they both knew it wasn't. The next morning came too fast. Ethan was up at 4, checking his phone obsessively for updates from the security team watching Mila's school. Nothing unusual? No suspicious vehicles? No attempts at contact. He got Mila ready for school with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Helped her with breakfast. Packed her lunch with extra care, like doing it perfectly would somehow protect her. You're nervous, she said, watching him over her cereal. Little bit. Is it going to be okay? Yeah, it is. He kissed the top of her head. I love you, kiddo. Don't forget that. I won't. I love you too. She paused. Dad? Be careful. Always am. He dropped her at school, watched her walk inside, flanked by teachers and students, and the ordinary chaos of a normal morning. The security personnel were in position. The police patrol rolled past on schedule, everything as safe as he could make it. Now came the hard part. Ethan headed to Meridian, but instead of going to the basement, he took the elevator straight to 32. Sienna was in her office, wearing armor in the form of a sharp suit and sharper expression. The Singapore meeting is at 10, she said. Chen will be there. So will representatives from Vertex Holdings. Good. Let them play their hand. Ethan pulled out his phone, showed her the evidence he'd compiled. When they make their move, we'll be ready to counter with this. Proof of corporate espionage, financial fraud, conspiracy, everything we need to bury them. And if they don't make their move, they will. They've invested too much to walk away now. He met her eyes. But Sienna, when this goes down, it's going to get ugly. They'll deny everything, threaten lawsuits, maybe worse. Are you ready for that? She straightened, CEO mask sliding into place. I've been ready since I was 22 years old and someone tried to destroy me in a parking garage. I didn't survive that to lose now. Okay then. Ethan checked his watch. You've got 2 hours. I'm going to make sure everything's in place on my end. After that, we finish this. He left her office and headed for the server room one last time, securing the digital evidence trail and preparing contingencies in case things went sideways. Because they always did. Plans were just fantasies until reality punched you in the face and made you adapt. At 9:50, Ethan positioned himself in an empty conference room across from where the Singapore meeting was being held. He had audio feed from Sienna's phone, could hear everything that happened without being visible. The meeting started exactly on time. Pleasantries. Introductions. Then down to business. And that's when everything fell apart. Through the audio feed, Ethan heard Sienna's voice, calm and professional. Gentlemen, thank you for meeting on such short notice. I understand Vertex has concerns about our Singapore timeline. A man's voice responded, older, confident in the way that came from never being told no. Ms. Hart, we appreciate your flexibility. Recent developments have made us reconsider the valuation. What developments? Structural issues with 2 of the properties. Environmental concerns with a 3rd. Our inspectors discovered them yesterday. A pause. We're prepared to move forward, but the price needs to reflect these newly discovered liabilities. Ethan's jaw tightened. There it was, the manufactured crisis, right on schedule. They'd planted false inspection reports to justify slashing their offer, banking on Sienna being desperate enough to accept rather than lose the deal entirely. He heard papers shuffling, then Lawrence Chen's voice, oily and accommodating. The reports are thorough, Sienna. I've reviewed them myself. The issues are legitimate. We should consider Vertex's revised offer carefully. How revised? Sienna asked. 220 million, down from 400. The room across the hall went silent. Ethan could picture it. Sienna processing the gut punch. Chen pretending to be concerned. The Vertex representatives waiting to see if she'd break. When Sienna spoke again, her voice was steel wrapped in silk. That's an interesting proposal, but before we discuss numbers, I have some questions about these inspection reports. Of course, the older man said. What would you like to know? Who conducted them? Hartford Engineering, very reputable firm out of Singapore. And when exactly did you commission these inspections? A beat of hesitation. Last week, when our due diligence raised some initial concerns. Interesting. Ethan heard the click of a laptop opening. Because Hartford Engineering's business license in Singapore was suspended 3 months ago for falsifying structural reports, they're currently under criminal investigation. The silence that followed was different now, dangerous. Chen jumped in quickly. That must be a different firm. Common name. Oh, it's not. Sienna's voice cut through. I have the business registration numbers right here. Same company, same principles, same pattern of fraud. Another pause. I also have records showing that Vertex Holdings wired $150,000 to Hartford Engineering 5 days ago. Care to explain that? Ms. Hart, I don't appreciate these accusations. Then you're really not going to appreciate what comes next. Ethan heard her stand. Lawrence, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building within the hour. What? Sienna, you can't. I can, and I am. I have evidence that you've been accepting payments from a shell company controlled by Vertex Holdings. Almost $2 million over 3 months. You've been feeding them inside information about our negotiations, our financial position, our strategy. Her voice was cold now, the CEO who'd built an empire showing exactly why she'd succeeded. I'm terminating you for cause. You'll receive no severance, no references, and if you're smart, you'll hire a very good lawyer. Ethan heard chairs scraping, raised voices. The Vertex representatives trying to regain control of a situation that had just blown up in their faces. Ms. Hart, these are serious allegations. Yes, they are, which is why I've already forwarded everything to the SEC and the FBI. They'll be very interested in your pattern of corporate espionage and fraud. Sienna's heels clicked across the floor. This meeting is over. The Singapore deal proceeds at the original terms with our other interested buyers. Vertex Holdings is permanently blacklisted from any future Meridian transactions. You're making a mistake, the older man said, voice tight with barely controlled anger. We have resources you can't imagine. Connections. We could destroy what? My company? My reputation? Sienna laughed, sharp and humorless. 8 years ago, 3 men tried to destroy me in a parking garage. I survived that. You think I'm afraid of corporate litigation? The threat in the room shifted. Ethan was already moving out of the conference room and down the hall because the tone had changed from business aggression to something more personal, more dangerous. He pushed through the meeting room door just as one of the Vertex representatives, not the older man, but a younger one who'd been silent until now, stood abruptly, hand moving toward his jacket in a way that Ethan recognized instantly. Don't! Ethan's voice cut across the room. Everyone turned. The younger man's hand froze. Sienna's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered fast. Mr. Vale, I wasn't expecting you. Yeah, well, meetings like this tend to need supervision. Ethan kept his attention on the younger man. You want to take your hand away from whatever you're reaching for, or do we need to make this complicated? I was just getting my phone, the man said. Sure you were. Do it slowly. The hand emerged empty, but the look in the man's eyes told Ethan everything he needed to know. This wasn't just corporate espionage anymore. Vertex had brought muscle to the negotiation. The older man, clearly the one in charge, stood with deliberate calm. Ms. Hart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We came here in good faith. You came here to manipulate me into accepting a fraction of what my properties are worth. Sienna gathered her files. Lawrence, security is waiting outside. I suggest you don't make this harder than it needs to be. Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but one glance at Ethan's expression changed his mind. He walked to the door, shoulders slumped, 12 years of loyalty revealed as 12 years of positioning himself for exactly this betrayal. The Vertex team followed, the older man pausing at the door. "This isn't over, Ms. Hart. You've made powerful enemies today." "I've had powerful enemies before," Sienna said quietly. "They underestimated me too." After they left, the conference room felt too quiet. Sienna sank into her chair, the adrenaline visibly draining. "That went better than expected." "Did it?" Ethan moved to the window, checked the street below. "Because from where I'm standing, you just backed a dangerous group into a corner. People like that don't just walk away." "What was I supposed to do? Let them steal $400 million worth of assets? No. You did the right thing, but now we need to deal with the consequences." He turned to face her. "The younger guy who reached for his jacket. That wasn't a phone. That was a weapon check. Reflex action. He's done it before." Sienna's face paled. "You think they'd actually... I think they just lost a massive payday and got humiliated by someone they thought they could control. Yeah, I think they might escalate." Ethan pulled out his phone, called the security team at Mila's school. "Status? All clear. Subject is in class. No unusual activity." "Keep it that way. Nobody gets close." He disconnected, looked at Sienna. "You need to go somewhere safe, somewhere they can't find you easily." "I'm not hiding in my own building." "I'm not asking you to hide, I'm asking you to be smart." He moved to the door, checked the hallway. Vertex just lost Chen as their inside source. They're going to try something else. We need to be ready. His phone buzzed. Detective Carver. "Vale, we've got a problem. That man you told me about from the coffee shop? We just found him. He's dead." Ethan's blood went cold. "How?" "Looks like a professional hit. Single shot, execution style, body dumped in an alley downtown." Carver's voice was grim. "Whatever you've stepped into, it just graduated from corporate fraud to murder. I need you to come in and make a statement, now." "I can't. Not yet. This isn't optional anymore. Someone's killing witnesses, and you're at the top of a very short list of people who can connect the dots. Give me 6 hours. I need to make sure some people are safe first." 6 hours, Vale. Then I'm coming to find you." The line went dead. Ethan looked at Sienna. "They just killed the contractor I confronted yesterday, probably to make sure he couldn't talk if this whole thing unraveled." "Oh my!" "Which means they're cleaning house. Anyone who knows too much becomes a liability." He grabbed her arm, not rough but firm enough to get her attention. "You need to call your security team. Personal protection, 24/7. And you need to do it now." She nodded, pulled out her phone with shaking hands. While she made the call, Ethan's mind raced through scenarios. Vertex had just shown they were willing to kill to protect their operation. Chen was in custody but vulnerable. The evidence chain was solid, but only if people stayed alive to testify. And Mila was sitting in a classroom, protected by 2 security guards who didn't know they might be facing killers. He called the team again. "Change of plans, pull her out of school, tell them it's a family emergency. Take her to the safe house location I gave you, and stay there until I call." "Copy that, moving now." Sienna finished her call, face drawn. "Security's on the way. They'll be here in 15 minutes. "Not fast enough." Ethan moved to the door. "Come with me. We're not waiting here like targets." They took the service elevator to the basement, Ethan's hand hovering near the tool belt he was still wearing. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The maintenance corridors were empty, just humming machines and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out and surreal. "Where are we going?" Sienna asked. "Server room. Most secure location in the building. Reinforced walls, controlled access, only one entry point." He punched in his access code, pulled her inside. "We stay here until your security arrives." The server room was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Rows of blinking equipment, the steady drone of cooling systems, the particular smell of electronics and recycled air. Ethan locked the door behind them, moved to the corner where he had the best sightline. Sienna leaned against a server rack, trying to steady her breathing. "This is really happening. People are dying because of a real estate deal." "People die because of money all the time. Real estate, drugs, political power, the commodity changes, but the violence is always the same." Ethan kept his eyes on the door. "You just happened to be in the way of someone who wanted your commodity badly enough to kill for it. How did you live like this?" Always looking over your shoulder, always expecting the worst? You get used to it, then you get numb to it. Then one day you realize you can't remember what it felt like to be normal. He glanced at her. That's when you know you've been in too long. Is that why you left? That life? I left because I had a daughter who needed a father more than the world needed another killer. The words came easier now, like he'd said them enough times that they'd stopped cutting. And because I helped a woman in a parking garage and remembered what it felt like to do something good. Sienna was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, I never thanked you properly. For that night. You don't need to. Yes, I do. Because you saved my life, and then you paid a terrible price for it. And I never got to tell you that it mattered, that I built everything I have now on the foundation of that night, on the knowledge that someone I didn't know risked everything for me when they didn't have to. Ethan looked at her then, really looked. Saw not the CEO or the powerful executive, but the frightened 22-year-old who'd been attacked and saved and had spent 8 years trying to become strong enough that it would never happen again. You would have been fine without me, he said. Maybe, but I wouldn't have been me without you. She pushed off the server rack, crossed to where he stood. Everything I've built, every risk I've taken, every time I chose to be brave instead of safe, it's because I watched you do it first. You showed me what courage actually looks like. Courage is just fear with a deadline. I was terrified that night. But you moved anyway. That's what makes it courage. She touched his arm lightly. Thank you, Ethan, for 8 years ago. For today. For protecting someone who probably doesn't deserve it. You deserve it. You've earned it. He checked his phone. 2 minutes since he'd called Mila's security team. They should have her out of the classroom by now, moving to the vehicle. And when this is over, when Vertex is buried and Chen's in prison and you've closed your Singapore deal, you're going to keep building, because that's what you do. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure my daughter knows her father is someone she can be proud of. Not because I was never scared, but because I did what was right even when it cost me everything. His phone buzzed. The security team. We have the package. En route to safe house. ETA 20 minutes. Relief flooded through him so fast it was almost painful. Copy. Stay alert. Call me when you arrive. Sienna read his expression. Mila? She's out. They're taking her somewhere safe. He leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Now we just have to make sure this ends before... The lights went out. Not flickering, not dimming. Complete darkness, so absolute it was disorienting. The server room's emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately, but there was nothing. Just black and the sudden silence of machines that had stopped humming. Ethan? Sienna's voice, controlled but tight. Don't move, don't make noise. He pulled out his phone, using the screen glow to orient himself. The servers were down. All of them. Someone had killed the main power and the backup generators simultaneously. This isn't an accident. They're in the building. Yeah. Ethan moved toward where he remembered the door being, phone light barely cutting the dark. They cut power to disable security systems, cameras, door locks, everything. Your security team is probably stuck in an elevator or dealing with building evacuation protocols. He reached the door, tested it, locked from the outside. We're trapped. Something scraped against metal outside. Footsteps. Multiple people moving with tactical precision. Ethan killed his phone light, plunged them back into darkness. Get behind the server rack in the far corner. Stay low. Stay quiet. What are you going to do? What I'm good at. He felt his way along the wall, found the tool cabinet he'd installed 6 months ago. Inside were the usual maintenance supplies, and underneath those, in a false bottom only he knew about, were items that had nothing to do with facilities work. A tactical flashlight, a folding knife, and a pistol he'd sworn he'd never touch again. He pulled them out by touch, muscle memory from a different life guiding his hands. The gun felt wrong and familiar all at once, like greeting an old friend you'd hoped to never see again. The door handle rattled, someone testing it, looking for the easiest entry point. Then voices, muffled but audible. Maintenance override, Alpha 7 access. Chen's voice. They'd kept him alive long enough to get his access codes, then brought him here to unlock doors his credentials could open. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Ethan moved to the side of the door, back against the wall, weapon up. The first person through would be Point Man, likely armed, definitely expecting resistance. He'd have maybe 2 seconds to neutralize the threat before the rest of the team reacted. The door swung open. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping right to left. Standard entry pattern. Ethan waited until the beam passed him, then moved. He grabbed the flashlight, twisted it down and away, used the momentum to drive his shoulder into the man's chest. They went down hard, Ethan's elbow connecting with the man's throat. Not fatal, but enough to make him stop being a problem for the next few minutes. Shouts from the hallway. More flashlight beams. Ethan grabbed the dropped weapon, a submachine gun, military grade, and fired 3 rounds into the ceiling. Warning shots. Back off, or the next ones aren't aimed high. The beams retreated. A voice called out, familiar from the coffee shop meeting. The older Vertex representative. Mr. Vale, we don't want to hurt you. Just send out Ms. Hart and this ends peacefully. You killed your own contractor. Peaceful isn't really your style. He was a loose end. You don't have to be. A pause. We know about your daughter, about where she goes to school. Walk away now, and she stays safe. Ethan's grip on the weapon tightened. You come near her and I'll show you exactly what Marcus Webb was capable of before he retired. Marcus Webb is dead. You said so yourself. The voice moved, circling toward a different angle. You're Ethan Vale now, single father, maintenance worker, not a killer anymore. Want to test that theory? Silence. Then movement, fast and coordinated. They were positioning for a breach, multiple angles, overwhelming force. Ethan had maybe 30 seconds before this turned into a firefight he couldn't win. He moved back to where Sienna was hidden. When I say run, you go out the emergency access panel in the back corner. It leads to the cooling ducts. Follow them left, 50 feet, then down. You'll come out in the parking garage. What about you? I'll buy you time. Now move. She hesitated. Ethan, move! Sienna ran. Ethan heard her find the panel, pry it open, squeeze through. Then he turned back to the door and did the thing he'd sworn 8 years ago he'd never do again. He became Marcus Webb. The breach came from 3 directions simultaneously. Door, ceiling vent, emergency access panel they'd found. Professional team, military training, expensive equipment, exactly the kind of opposition that would have killed Ethan Vale. But Marcus Webb had fought worse and survived. Ethan moved before they could acquire targets, sliding under the server rack and coming up on the blind side of the door team. 2 shots, center mass, both men down. Roll left as the ceiling team fired where he'd been. Pop up, acquire, fire. 1 more down. The 4th man was smarter, using Chen as a human shield. Ethan didn't hesitate. Shot Chen in the shoulder, non-fatal, but enough to make him drop. The 4th man had a split second to decide between shooting and saving himself. He chose wrong. Ethan's round caught him in the leg. He went down hard, weapon skittering across the floor. The room went silent except for groaning and Chen's whimpering. Ethan kicked the weapons away, checked each man quickly. All alive, all going to stay that way if they didn't do anything stupid. He pulled out his phone, called Detective Carver. I've got 4 suspects in custody at Meridian Tower basement. Active crime scene. Send everyone. Vale, what the hell, Saul? Just send everyone. Now. He disconnected, checked the hallway. Empty. The Vertex team had sent their best, and their best hadn't been good enough, but the older man, the one who'd been doing the talking, was gone. He'd let his team die while he escaped. Smart, ruthless, exactly what Ethan would have done. He found Sienna in the parking garage, pressed against a concrete pillar, eyes wide. You're bleeding. Ethan looked down. Grazed by something during the breach, not serious. I'm fine. You killed them? No, they're alive. Injured, but alive. He wiped blood from his hand. Police are on the way. We need to stay here until they arrive. She stared at him like she'd never seen him before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she'd only ever seen Ethan Vale, and now Marcus Webb was standing in front of her, gun still in hand, face expressionless in the way that came from doing terrible things and learning to live with them. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. Don't apologize. You saved my life. Again. She pushed off the pillar, moved closer. But Ethan, what you just did was necessary. They were going to kill you. I couldn't let that happen. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Carver would have questions. So would the FBI. So would everyone who'd see the security footage and wonder how a maintenance contractor had taken down a professional tactical team. Marcus Webb was about to become very visible. and that meant Ethan Vale's carefully constructed life was over. "I need to call Mila," he said. "Make sure she knows I'm okay." "Ethan," Sienna caught his arm. "Whatever happens next, whatever questions they ask, I'll handle it. I'll make sure they understand you were protecting me, that you had no choice." "I always had a choice. I chose this." He looked at her steadily. "No regrets." The police arrived in a flood of lights and noise, Carver at the front, taking in the scene with the weary expression of a cop who'd seen too much. He looked at Ethan, at the weapon still in his hand, at the blood. "You want to tell me what happened here?" "Later. First, I need to know my daughter's safe." Carver nodded to one of his officers. "Check on the security team escorting Vale's daughter. Make sure they're at the safe house and secure." The officer made the call, came back 2 minutes later. "All clear. Package is secure." Relief hit Ethan so hard he had to lean against the wall. Mila was safe. Everything else was secondary. "Okay," he said to Carver. "Now I'll tell you everything." And he did. The corporate espionage, the death threats, the tactical team sent to kill Sienna. Everything except the parts about Marcus Webb that would raise questions he couldn't answer. By the time he finished, the sun was setting and the building was swarming with federal agents. The FBI had taken over, following the money trail that would lead them to Vertex Holdings and everyone involved. Chen was in custody, facing charges that would put him away for decades. The tactical team members who'd survived were being transported to hospitals under guard, and Ethan was sitting in the back of an ambulance, getting his injuries treated, watching his old life disappear in real time. Sienna found him there as the EMT finished bandaging his arm. "The FBI wants to talk to you, but I told them you need rest first. I need to see my daughter. My security team is bringing her here. She'll arrive in about 20 minutes. Sienna sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You did it. Vertex is finished. The Singapore deal is back on track. Everything you planned worked." "Yeah, it worked." But his voice was flat, emotionless. "What's wrong?" "I just became visible again. Every agency with an alphabet in its name is going to run my background now. They'll find discrepancies, gaps, things that don't add up." He looked at her. "Marcus Webb is about to be resurrected, whether I want him to be or not. Then we'll deal with it. Together." She took his hand. "You saved my company. You saved my life. Whatever you need, I'm here." Before Ethan could respond, a black SUV pulled into the parking garage. His heart stopped as the door opened and Mila jumped out, running toward him with the kind of desperate speed that came from being 8 years old and scared. "Dad!" He caught her, held her so tight it probably hurt, but he couldn't make himself let go. "Hey, kiddo, I'm okay. Everything's okay. You're bleeding. Just a scratch. Barely counts." He pulled back, looked at her seriously. "Were you scared?" "Yeah, but the security people said you were handling it, that you'd keep us safe." She touched the bandage on his arm. "Did you get hurt fighting bad guys?" "Something like that." "Did you win?" Ethan thought about the men in the server room, about Chen's betrayal, about Vertex's collapse. Thought about Sienna standing here beside him, safe and whole. Thought about Mila in his arms, unharmed. "Yeah," he said, "I won." The FBI interviews lasted 3 days. They asked about his military background, his timeline at Meridian, how a facilities contractor had the skills to take down a professional tactical team. Ethan told them the truth, most of it anyway. Army service, specialized training, honorable discharge. He left out the parts about Marcus Webb and the years that came after, the work that didn't show up in any official records. Detective Carver sat in on the second interview, and when the federal agents left for a break, he leaned back in his chair and studied Ethan with tired eyes. "You're a better liar than most," Carver said, "but you're still lying." "I told you what happened. You told me a version that fits the evidence without explaining why a guy who fixes air conditioners fights like special operations." He pulled out a folder, opened it. "I did some digging. Ethan Vale didn't exist before 8 years ago. No birth certificate, no school records, no credit history. Just appeared fully formed like you walked out of nowhere." Ethan's throat went tight, but his expression stayed neutral. Witness protection sometimes creates new identities. "That's what I thought too, so I checked with the Marshal Service. They have no record of an Ethan Vale in their system." Carver closed the folder. "Want to try again?" "I was someone else before. Someone I'm not proud of. I changed my name legally and started over. That's not illegal. No, but depending on who you were before, it might be relevant to this investigation. It's not. Whoever I was, I left that behind to raise my daughter. Ethan met his eyes. That's the only part that matters. Carver was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed the folder across the table. You saved Ms. Hart's life. You stopped a conspiracy that would have destroyed a major corporation and hurt a lot of innocent people. The FBI is satisfied with your statement, and so am I. He stood. But Vale? Whatever you're running from, it won't stay buried forever. Eventually, someone's going to dig deep enough to find the truth. I know. When that happens, make sure you're on the right side of it. Carver moved to the door, paused. Your daughter's lucky to have you. Don't forget that when the past comes calling. After he left, Ethan sat alone in the interview room, staring at the folder Carver had left behind. He didn't open it, didn't need to. He knew what it contained, questions without answers, gaps that couldn't be explained, the shape of a man who'd been carefully erased. Marcus Webb's ghost, refusing to stay dead. Sienna was waiting when he finally emerged, sitting in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee and the kind of patience that came from understanding what it meant to be interrogated. She handed him one without asking. They're done? For now. Ethan drank, grateful for the bitter warmth. How's the Singapore deal? Closing tomorrow, full price, original terms. Vertex's attempt to sabotage it actually made the other buyers more eager. A slight smile. Turns out, exposing corporate espionage makes you look competent. You are competent. I had help. She set down her coffee. The FBI arrested the senior Vertex executives this morning. The whole operation is unraveling. Chen's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. She paused. It's over, Ethan. You did it. We did it. No. You did it. I just had the resources you needed. Sienna stood, gestured for him to follow. Walk with me. There's something I want to show you. They left the federal building, walked 3 blocks in comfortable silence until they reached a small park tucked between office towers. Not much. Some benches, struggling trees, a playground where a handful of kids were climbing on equipment that had seen better days. Sienna sat on a bench facing the playground. Ethan joined her, confused but willing to wait for whatever point she was making. 8 years ago, after the parking garage, I was terrified, she said quietly. Not just of what had almost happened, but of how close I'd come to giving up. I was going to quit, move back home, tell my father he was right, that I wasn't strong enough for this world. She watched the kids play. Then I remembered the man who saved me, how he'd been hurt, probably terrified, but he'd moved anyway, done what needed to be done without hesitation. Sienna, I decided that if someone I didn't know could be that brave for me, I could be that brave for myself. So I stayed, built the company, took risks that scared me, became the person I needed to be. She looked at him. You gave me that, whether you meant to or not. I was just trying to help. And you did. More than you know. She pulled an envelope from her jacket. Which is why I'm offering you this. Not as payment, not as obligation, as partnership. Ethan took the envelope, opened it. Inside was a contract, dense with legal language, but the key terms were clear enough. Director of Security and Strategic Operations, Meridian Properties. Full benefits, substantial salary. Equity stake in the company. But more than that, language about flexible hours, family priorities, decision-making authority. It wasn't a job offer. It was an invitation. I already told you no to this, he said. That was different. That was me trying to hire someone I thought I needed. This is me offering partnership to someone I respect. Sienna gestured at the contract. Look at page 3, the family provision. He flipped pages, found it. A clause stating that family obligations took precedence over work obligations. That picking up his daughter from school was not just permitted but protected. That no meeting, no crisis, no emergency could supersede his role as Mila's father. You wrote this into a corporate contract? I wrote it into our partnership agreement, because I learned something watching you these past few weeks. The strongest people aren't the ones who sacrifice everything for success. They're the ones who know what actually matters and refuse to compromise on it. She stood. You're the best tactical mind I've ever seen. You're loyal, competent, and you care about protecting people. But more than that, you're a good father, and I want someone who understands priorities on my executive team. Ethan stared at the contract, at the words that seemed too good to be true. What happens when my past catches up with me, when someone digs deep enough to find Marcus Webb? Then we deal with it, together. Sienna's voice was firm. I don't care who you used to be. I care about who you are now. And right now, you're the man who saved my company and kept his daughter safe. That's enough for me. It might not be enough for the FBI, or whoever else comes looking. Then we'll face it head on. No running, no hiding. She held out her hand. Partners face problems together. That's the deal. Ethan looked at her outstretched hand, at the contract, at the playground where kids were being kids without worrying about threats or danger or the weight of past decisions. He thought about Mila, about the life he wanted to give her. Not one where they were always running, always looking over their shoulders, but one where they could stay in one place long enough to call it home. I have conditions, he said. Name them. First, you never put Mila at risk. If something threatens her, I walk away and you don't try to stop me. Agreed. Second, I'm not Marcus Webb anymore. I don't do that kind of work. Security consulting, threat assessment, protection, fine. But I'm not killing people for you. I would never ask you to. Third, we're honest with each other. No games, no manipulation, no using what you know about my past as leverage. He met her eyes. You treat me like an equal partner or this doesn't work. Sienna lowered her hand and for a moment he thought he'd pushed too far. Then she smiled, genuine and warm. Fourth condition. You call me Sienna, not Ms. Hart. Partners don't use titles. That's your condition? That's my condition. Because you're right, this only works if we're equals. And equals use first names. She offered her hand again. So what do you say, Ethan? Want to be partners? He thought about the go bag still packed in his closet. About 8 years of running and hiding and trying to be invisible. About Mila asking if they were in danger and him not having a good answer. About standing in a server room, weapon in hand, becoming Marcus Webb one more time because someone he cared about needed protecting. Maybe running wasn't the answer. Maybe the answer was standing still long enough to build something worth protecting. Ethan shook her hand. Partners. That evening, he picked up Mila from Mrs. Chen's apartment with a lightness in his chest that felt unfamiliar. The old woman took one look at his face and smiled. Good news? She asked. Yeah, really good news. Mila was doing homework at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table, the same way she'd done it 100 times before. But when she saw Ethan, she jumped up with the kind of energy that came from being 8 years old and resilient. Dad, can we get pizza tonight, please? Yeah, kiddo, we can get pizza. He looked at Mrs. Chen. Want to join us? Celebration dinner. What are we celebrating? New job, new start, new everything. He picked up Mila's backpack, and me finally figuring out that sometimes you have to stop running and start building. They ordered pizza, ate it in their cramped apartment with Mrs. Chen telling stories about her grandson and Mila showing off her latest art project. Normal, unremarkable. The kind of evening that Ethan had spent 8 years trying to protect. After Mrs. Chen left and Mila was getting ready for bed, she paused in her bedroom doorway. Dad, are we staying here? In this apartment, this city? Yeah, we're staying. What about the bad guys? What if they come back? Ethan sat on the edge of her bed, the same way he did every night. The bad guys from this week are gone. In jail or running scared, but there might be others someday. There usually are. He tucked her blanket around her. But here's what I learned. Running doesn't make you safe. It just makes you tired. So we're going to stay and build something good. And if trouble comes, we'll face it together. You and me? You, me, and some people who care about us. People who will help protect what matters. He kissed her forehead. You're going to grow up here, Mila. Make friends who last, go to a school you actually like, have a home that isn't temporary. That's my promise. She was quiet, processing. Then, is Ms. Hart one of those people? The ones who help? Yeah, she is. I like her. She seems strong. She is strong and kind, and she understands that family comes first. Ethan stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we're going to start looking at bigger apartments. Maybe one where I actually have my own room. Can we get one with 2 bathrooms? Sophie says having 2 bathrooms is amazing. We can look at ones with 2 bathrooms. Mila grinned, settled into her pillows. Night, Dad. Night, kiddo. He left her door cracked the way she liked it and went to the living room. His phone buzzed. Sienna. Did you tell her about the job? Mentioned it. She's more excited about the possibility of a second bathroom. Smart kid. A pause. Ethan, thank you for taking the risk, for trusting me. Thank you for making it worth the risk. He looked around the apartment at the life he'd built from nothing and the future that was starting to take shape. When do I start? Officially, 2 weeks. That gives you time to transition out of maintenance and get oriented with the executive team. He could hear the smile in her voice. Unofficially? Tomorrow. The Singapore deal closes at 10 a.m. I want you there. As what? As my partner. As the person who helped make it happen. As Ethan Vale, Director of Security and Strategic Operations. She paused. Wear something nicer than your work clothes. We're celebrating after. I don't really do celebrations. You do now. That's part of the partnership agreement. She laughed, light and genuine. See you tomorrow, partner. The call ended. Ethan sat in the quiet apartment thinking about everything that had changed in 3 weeks. From invisible contractor to visible partner. From running to building. From trying to bury Marcus Webb to accepting that maybe both versions of himself could exist. The man who'd done terrible things and the man trying to do better. He pulled out the go bag from the closet, looked at it for a long moment. The passports, the cash, the evidence of a life spent ready to disappear. Then he started unpacking it. Put the money in a real savings account. Filed the fake passports in a drawer he'd probably never open again. Took the tactical gear and locked it in a safe, accessible if needed, but not living in his closet like a constant reminder of who he used to be. The bag itself he folded and stored in the back of the closet, empty now. A precaution, maybe. Or just the last piece of a life he was finally ready to let go. The next morning, Ethan wore the one suit he owned, bought 3 years ago for a custody hearing that never happened, worn twice since then to occasions he couldn't remember. It fit badly, the shoulders too tight, but it would do. Mila stared at him over breakfast. You look weird. Thanks, kiddo. Real confidence boost. I mean, you look good weird, like a different person. She tilted her head. Are you nervous? Little bit. Don't be. You're smart and brave and you saved Ms. Hart's whole company. You're going to be great. She went back to her cereal, matter of fact in the way kids were when they believed something completely. Ethan dropped her at school, watched her run inside with her backpack bouncing, and felt something settle in his chest. This was right. Maybe messy, maybe complicated, but right. The Singapore deal closing was held in Meridian's main conference room, the one with windows overlooking the city and enough space for lawyers, executives, and the weight of a $400 million transaction. Ethan arrived early, found Sienna already there, looking sharp in a gray suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent used to be. You made it, she said. You sound surprised. I'm not, but I'm glad. She gestured to a seat beside her at the conference table. That's yours. Partners sit together. The closing took 2 hours, dense with legal language and signature pages and wire transfer confirmations. Ethan mostly watched, absorbing how these things worked, learning the rhythm of high-stakes negotiations. But every time Sienna referenced security protocols or risk assessment, she looked at him for confirmation, including him, making it clear he belonged there. When it was done, when the final signatures were collected and the wire transfers confirmed, the room erupted in polite applause. Sienna stood, shook hands with the buyers, accepted congratulations from her legal team. Then she turned to Ethan. We did it. You did it. I just helped. No, we did it together, she addressed the room. I want to introduce Meridian's new Director of Security and Strategic Operations, Ethan Vale. He's the reason this deal is happening at all, the reason we're all standing here instead of picking up pieces. The applause was genuine this time, people who'd heard about the Vertex situation nodding appreciation. Ethan stood awkwardly, not used to recognition, not sure how to handle being seen this way. One of the lawyers approached after, an older woman with sharp eyes. Vale, I heard you took down a tactical team in the server room. That true? Mostly true. Military background? Something like that. She studied him. My firm handles security consulting for several major corporations. If you ever want to freelance, we pay very well. I'm good where I am, but thanks. After the formal closing, Sienna's executive team gathered for lunch at a restaurant that had cloth napkins and a wine list. Ethan felt out of place among people who knew which fork to use, but Sienna kept him anchored, including him in conversations, making it clear he had every right to be there. Her CFO, The replacement for Chen, brought in 2 days ago, leaned across the table. Vale, Sienna says you identified the Vertex conspiracy within 48 hours. How'd you do it? Pattern recognition. Most corporate espionage follows the same playbook. You just have to know what to look for. And you learned that in the military? Learned it in a lot of places. Ethan sipped water, deflecting. Mostly learned that people who want something badly enough will always make mistakes. You just have to be patient enough to catch them. The conversation moved on, but the CFO kept watching him with the kind of curiosity that came from knowing there was more to the story. Ethan was used to that look, had spent 8 years avoiding it. But now, sitting here as part of Sienna's team, maybe it was okay to be seen as someone with a complicated past. Maybe that was part of what made him valuable. After lunch, Sienna pulled him aside while the others headed back to the office. There's one more place I want to take you, if you have time. I've got until 3:15, Mila. I know, this won't take long. They walked 4 blocks to a parking garage. Not the one from 8 years ago, but similar enough that Ethan felt the echo of memory. Sienna led him to the lower level, stopped at a specific spot. This is where it happened, she said quietly. Where you saved me. Sienna, you don't have to. I know. But I want to. She turned to face him. For 8 years I came back here on the anniversary, stood in this spot and tried to remember details. What you looked like, what you'd said, whether you'd survived. Her voice caught slightly. I never stopped looking for you. Never stopped wondering if you were okay. I'm okay. Because of choices I made after that night. Because of you. No. Because of you. You chose to help when you didn't have to, and that choice cost you everything. She reached out, took his hand. So I'm standing here 8 years late saying thank you, not as your boss or your partner, just as the person whose life you saved. Ethan looked at the concrete pillar where he'd leaned while bleeding, listening to her footsteps fade, the spot where Sarah had found him 3 hours later, half conscious, and helped him disappear before anyone could ask questions. The place where Marcus Webb had made the choice that would eventually lead to becoming Ethan Vale. You're welcome, he said simply. But Sienna, you've thanked me enough. You gave me a second chance, a way to use what I know for something good. That's more than I deserved. It's exactly what you deserved, and it's what we're going to keep building together. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Partners don't just work together. They protect each other, trust each other. That's what we are now. Yeah, that's what we are. They stood there for a moment longer in the place where everything had changed before heading back into the light. 3 months later, Ethan stood in the doorway of his new apartment, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, actual closet space, watching Mila direct the movers with the authority of someone who'd seen too many adult decisions and decided she could make better ones. The couch goes against that wall. No, the other wall. Dad, tell them the other wall. The other wall, guys, Ethan called out, grinning. Mrs. Chen had come to help, bringing food and commentary. This is good space, good light. That girl, she needs room to grow. Yeah, she does. Ethan handed a mover a box marked kitchen. Thanks for everything, Mrs. Chen, for all the times you helped when I couldn't afford to pay properly. You were a good tenant, good father. That's payment enough. She patted his arm. Besides, now you can pay properly. That's the building's problem, not mine. Sienna arrived mid-afternoon carrying a housewarming gift that turned out to be an expensive coffee maker and a note that said, Partners need good coffee. She stayed to help unpack, fitting in naturally with Mrs. Chen's stories and Mila's excitement. At one point, Mila pulled Sienna aside. Ethan watched from the kitchen, pretending not to listen. Are you and my dad dating? Mila asked bluntly. Sienna laughed, surprised. No, we work together. We're friends. Sophie's mom says when a man and woman are friends, they're usually dating. Sophie's mom doesn't know everything. Your dad and I are partners. That's different. How? Because partnership is about trust and respect. Dating is about romance. We have the first 2, not the third. Sienna crouched down to Mila's level. But I care about your dad very much, and about you. Is that okay? Mila considered this seriously. Yeah, that's okay. Just wanted to make sure you weren't going to be weird about it. I promised not to be weird about it. Satisfied, Mila went back to unpacking her stuffed animals. Sienna caught Ethan's eye across the room, mouthed, She's terrifying, and went back to organizing books like nothing had happened. Later, after Mrs. Chen left and Mila was occupied with setting up her room, Sienna found Ethan on the apartment's small balcony. It overlooked a courtyard. Nothing special, but it was theirs. "You settling in okay?" she asked. "Getting there. Still weird having this much space." "You'll get used to it." She leaned against the railing. "The board approved your security recommendations. Full implementation starts next month." "Good. The Vertex situation exposed a lot of vulnerabilities." "Yeah, but it also showed what's possible when we work together." She glanced at him. "How are you doing with the visibility thing? Being on the executive team, having your name on reports?" Ethan had worried about that, about being seen, about someone recognizing Marcus Webb in Ethan Vale's face. But 3 months in, nothing had happened. No mysterious contacts, no threatening calls, no signs that his past was catching up. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe the people who'd cared about Marcus Webb had moved on. Or maybe he'd gotten lucky. "I'm okay. Some days are harder than others, but I'm okay. If that changes, you tell me. We'll figure it out together." "Partners," he said. "Partners," she agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city settle into evening. Then Mila called from inside, something about needing help hanging posters, and Ethan went to be a father while Sienna stayed to be a friend who'd become family without either of them quite noticing when it happened. That night, after Sienna left and Mila was asleep in her new room, Ethan sat in his own bedroom, his first real bedroom in 8 years, and thought about the distance between who he'd been and who he was becoming. The gap wasn't closed, might never be fully closed, but it was narrower now, manageable. He pulled out his phone, opened a folder he'd been avoiding, photos from before. Sarah, young and laughing. Himself, harder-edged, dangerous in ways that went beyond physical. The life they'd tried to build before it all fell apart. "I did it," he whispered to the photos. "Gave Mila the life you wanted for her. Gave myself a second chance. I hope that's enough." The photos didn't answer, but somehow, sitting there in a home he'd earned honestly, doing work he could be proud of, raising a daughter who knew her father would always choose her first. Somehow, it felt like enough. 6 months after that, Ethan stood in Meridian Tower's lobby with Detective Carver, reviewing new security protocols. The detective had become an unofficial consultant, his experience bridging the gap between law enforcement and corporate security. "You've built something impressive here," Carver said, looking at the upgraded systems. "Vertex was a wake-up call, but you turned it into an opportunity." "That's what Sienna does, turns problems into opportunities." "What about you? What do you turn problems into?" Ethan thought about that. "Solutions, I guess. Or at least I try to make sure the problems don't happen again." Carver nodded slowly. "I never did find out who Marcus Webb was. Stopped looking after a while." "Why?" "Because whoever he was, he's gone now, and Ethan Vale is doing good work. Sometimes that's enough." The detective extended his hand. "You ever need anything? Call me. Partnership goes both ways." They shook, and Ethan felt another piece of his past settle into place. Not forgotten, not erased, but integrated into the person he was now. At 3:15, he left to pick up Mila from school. She ran out with Sophie, both girls laughing about something only they understood. As they walked home, Mila reached for his hand. "Dad, Sophie wants to know if I can sleep over Friday." "We'll talk to her mom. If it's okay with her, it's okay with me." "Really? You're not going to do the whole protective dad thing?" "I'm always going to do the protective dad thing, but I'm also going to trust you to make good choices." He looked down at her. "You've earned that." She grinned, squeezed his hand. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo." They walked through their neighborhood, not temporary anymore, just home. And Ethan thought about the journey from invisible contractor to visible partner, about the woman who'd never stopped looking for the man who saved her, about the daughter who deserved better than a father who only knew how to run. A year ago, if someone had offered him this life, he would have said it was impossible, that men like Marcus Webb didn't get second chances, that the weight of the past was too heavy to ever put down. But standing here, hand in hand with his daughter, heading home to an apartment that was actually theirs, working a job that made a difference, partnered with someone who saw his value instead of his danger. Maybe impossible was just another word for difficult. And difficult was something Ethan Vale had learned to handle. His phone buzzed. "Sienna. Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 8. Can you make it?" What's the emergency? Acquisition opportunity, Major 1. Want your assessment before I commit. A pause. If you can't make it because of Mila, I can make it. Mrs. Chen can take her to school. You're sure? Yeah, that's what partners do. Show up when it matters. See you tomorrow, partner. Ethan pocketed his phone, looked at Mila. Big meeting tomorrow. Important stuff. Is it scary important or exciting important? Maybe both, but we'll figure it out. You always do, she said, with the confidence of someone who'd watched her father face impossible things and survive them. And maybe that was the real lesson. Not that the past didn't matter, but that it didn't have to define you. Not that running was wrong, but that standing still could be braver. Not that redemption was easy, but that it was possible if you were willing to do the work. Ethan Vale had done the work, was still doing it, would probably always be doing it. But for the first time in 8 years, he wasn't doing it alone. They reached their building, climbed the stairs to their apartment, and started the ordinary evening routine of homework and dinner and bedtime stories. Ordinary, unremarkable, precious. Everything he'd fought for. Everything he'd thought he'd lost. Everything he'd learned to build again, one careful choice at a time. And in a city that never stopped moving, in an apartment that finally felt like home, Ethan Vale, former ghost, current partner, always father, finally let himself believe that maybe the future could be better than the past. Not perfect, never perfect, but good enough. And sometimes, good enough was everything.